on December the 17th, 1995, Wayne and I, my husband, stories about my husband Wayne, by the way, he had a full-time job working at the tax center up in Summerside, and we had purchased an old home, a farm home in New Haven, and I turned it into a bed and breakfast, and we had just a perfect life. I mean, our B&B was successful right from the very beginning. Our last guests had been at Thanksgiving in 1995. I started back at university and was working for my psychology degree. And life, I mean, is everything we had planned in Ontario. I had just recently moved back, and he's a comfortable wayer, so I took him with me. At any rate, we were only married 7 years, so we were pretty happy. So we're making Actually, probably not really went good. Anyway, I have a little saying that goes, man plans and God smiles. And I think that's what was happening. Because it was a Saturday on the 17th, and I was waiting for him to come home from Charlottetown. He had gone in to pick up some things for me, and we were going to go Christmas shopping. And he was supposed to be home by 4 o'clock. Well, if you know Wayne, you know nobody's a stranger, and he always talks to everybody. So I was getting a little ticked off because it was 4:30 and he still wasn't there, and it was 5 o'clock, and now I'm really upset. And all of a sudden the phone rings, so I pick it up quick and I'm going to yell at him. And this woman's voice said, "Do you know a Wayne Campbell?" And I said, "Well, of course, he's my husband." And she said, "There's been an accident. You have to come to the QEH right away." And I said, "What's the matter? What's the matter? You know, let me talk to him." She said, "Oh, I can't let you talk to him." So, of course, I think he's dead right away. I jump in my car, I run across the bypass. They had just built it to the hospital, praying that a cop would come and stop me so I could go faster. Of course, nobody, you know. And so I run into the emergency, and they met me at the door and took me in, and he's lying in a bed, and he's totally paralyzed. He can't speak, he can't move, his eyes are wide open, and he's just got this look of terror in his face. So I, of course, and it was a Saturday, our family doctor wasn't working, but the attending doctor said to me, I think he's had a massive stroke, and it doesn't look very good. So I tried to get him in bed. Well, they couldn't admit him because it was so close to Christmas and there was no beds available. So the doctor on call kept phoning the Minister of Health and giving him hell, and I'm in the middle of all of this. Anyway, they get a hold of him and they do open a bed. So at like 2 o'clock in the morning, so it's like Sunday morning, they find a bed in a ward for him, and I go up, and he's just completely out of it, totally. He's never recovered consciousness. And I was sitting beside him, just sitting there with my arm around him, and all of a sudden he gave this, I can't even describe, this moan that seemed to come from his toenails, and all the air went out of his body, and I can't get anybody. So I run in the bathroom, and by the way, if you ever want somebody to react, go in the bathroom and pull that. First and only time in my life, I had people running from every direction, and they all come down, and I said, well, you know, it just happened. But the nurses were nice. And first thing we're going to do is get him a CAT scan. The CAT scan machine is broken. So finally, around 9 o'clock in the morning, or 8, I don't know, sometime they got the CAT scan working, the PET scan, and we started out, and we just kept going out of the room, and he sat up, and he started this projectile vomiting of green bile all over me, himself, everywhere. And they're all running around yelling code and take him here and take him there, and I'm standing there crying, and he's completely out of it. And finally they came and told me they got a scan, I don't know which one, but anyway, they said not only did he have a massive stroke, but he's having a massive bleed in his basal ganglia, which is like the deepest part of the brain. There's absolutely nothing we can do. So we just have to make him comfortable. So a very kind nurse came along by this time and moved us into a private room on Unit 2. And they got me a cot, and I moved in with them. And for 3 weeks, there we were. I'm beside him, and finally, he started to come around. And I knew right away, cognitively, he had problems, but he had so many physical things wrong that the mind was really the last thing I was concerned about. Anyway, we got him, taught him how to eat again and speak again and walk a little bit, and it's crazy. I can't even. It's like it happened to somebody else. And Wayne had just turned 53 years old a week before this happened. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He worked out 3 times a week. He was 5'7". He weighed 145 pounds. He was a runner. He was a golfer. He played squash. He didn't have an ounce of excess fat on his body anywhere. And this happens. Then I find out a little later on that in his family, because this was a second marriage, and you don't ask all those questions you do, like, if you're going to have kids, you want to know. I mean, there was no way at this point. So I find out that his father had died at age 56 from hypertension and stroke. And his mother, his grandmother, and his uncles on her side, although most of them lived till their 80s, had all had Alzheimer's and died from it. But we didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that. He didn't even know it. Anyway, so the 3 weeks in the hospital, as I said, I spent with him, and we had aphasia, but then the speech therapist came in, taught him how to speak again slowly, and those whole 3 weeks he has absolutely no recall of that whatsoever. And yet, he was talking to me like he was alive and well, and we're joking and he's laughing, and he remembers nothing of that time. Anyway, by February they moved him down to Unit 7, and that's where they gave him some physio. But you got to remember, this is February 1996. There's nothing there. There's no physical medicine to speak of. And so they just tried to work with him for a little bit and told me some exercises, stretching I could do with him, and then said, you have to take him home. He's medically, there's nothing we can do for him, take him home. So I took him home. Oh, and one other thing I meant to mention. We had our family doctor, of course, was now back and everything, and he phoned doctors in Halifax and in St. John's, and we had this big conversation, and they just said, only 2% of the people that have this happen to ever survive, so just make them comfortable, and that's, So they sort of gave up on it. But I refused to give up on him. And I got him home, and I used to exercise with him every day and do stretching and whatever, and not really worrying about his mental state, because he just became like my favorite child, I went from being a wife to a mother in one giant step. So we were doing actually pretty good, and by the late 1998, 99, I thought we were in a pretty good spot. I mean, our whole relationship had changed, obviously, but still, he was doing well. A friend of ours had driven down from Ontario with a full-size 3-wheel bike, and he used to bicycle around the city for an hour, 2 hours, every day, up until the snow fell, He was doing really well. Now, me, not so much, but, that was okay. So, about the year, I don't know, maybe 2001, things started to change, and he started to fall a lot. And he was having these TIAs, and that's like the transischemic stroke. And then he'd be put in the hospital, and he'd be there for a week, and then I'd take him home, and then he'd be fine for a few months, and then he'd start again. And that's when he started becoming really depressed. And I think it's just then that, because he kept thinking that if he worked hard enough, that he was going to be returned to the way he was before, but obviously was never going to happen. And I think the realization that it was never going to happen was what really made him totally depressed. So anyway, just by the grapevine, I guess, one day I heard that the Heart and Stroke Foundation, along with physical medicine, had done some things over at the QEH now, and there was some help, and they had a support group. So I decided I'd go to the support group. So I go to the support group, and of course I just went total meltdown. And I guess they realized maybe I needed a little help. So the social worker came to our house, and we just did an evaluation of him, and they couldn't tell me anything more than I already knew. But they did tell me that about Brecken House, and it's a daycare at the old Prince Edward home. They used to have it. Well, he would, and he didn't want to go first. Matter of fact, he hated it. He said, "There's no way I'm not going there with all those weird people." But after his first visit, he loved it. He just wanted to go 3 times a week. Then I couldn't keep him. Then I couldn't keep him home. So by the time I'd get him up in the morning, dressed and fed and ready, I'd have to have him there for 9 o'clock. Then I'd have to be there to pick him up by 3. Well, it really wasn't. It was good in a sense, because I had a couple of hours I could go out, or But basically, it really wasn't doing all that much. Anyway, we trudged along. Our support group didn't get off the ground at all, with the exception of my friend Linda and I, because nobody else showed up. So I started going to the Alzheimer's Society, because Wayne had never been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it took me 2 years to get him to see a gerontologist. And then they decided that he had more vascular dementia and frontal lobe problems, and this is from the bleeds. And he constantly still has bleeds. Like some days I'll go in to see him and his eyes will be bloodshot really bad. And he has a lot of varicose veins in his legs, and that's, you can tell he's bleeding, little bleeds all the time. Anyway, so I started to go to the Alzheimer's Society meetings, and they were great, and they helped me a lot. It was a great place to just sort of be able to talk, and also to find out there were other people with problems worse than mine, which I didn't think was possible. But anyway, there were. And so anyway, at Christmas time in 2012, he had a terrible day, cried all day, fell asleep, me holding him, he fell asleep, and he just slept all day long. And I sat in my apartment and bawled my head off and thought, I gotta do something about this. So in 2013, I got him some antidepressants. Our doctor gave him some antidepressants, and he started to feel better. But unfortunately, from 2013 onwards, he just kept falling. I'd set him all up at home and say, now, everything's right here. I had a urinal for him, like, you don't have to go to the bathroom. Just stay right here till I come back. I've run to the grocery store. I come back one time. He says, don't be mad at me. I followed this row of blood into the bathroom. He went up to do something, fell face forward, broke his nose, chipped his tooth. Another, it was just one thing after the other. And then about October of 2014, he fell backwards on ceramic tile and required 12 stitches. So he was in the hospital. And then by January, I got a bed for him at Beach Grove. And that's where he is now. And he absolutely loves it. Sometimes he's glad, most times he's glad to see me. Sometimes he's like, what time are you leaving? But he gets along well with everyone, and he's very active in everything that's going on. He loves to paint. He's done really well at that. And it's good to see, but I've lost everything. I mean, I could write a book. You don't want to hear about the finances, but it's a horrible disease by any name. And we just live in anticipatory grief, waiting for the end, even though we know it'll be another loss. That's it.